In this video, let's talk about how I set up my outdoor UniFi PoE devices. I have Ubiquiti PoE switches in the server room inside my house. And in my backyard, I want to set up UniFi Wi-Fi access point and several protect cameras. The problem for me is because of the construct of the house, I have no way to run PoE Ethernet cables through the attic so that I can directly connect the outdoor PoE switches to my server room. I have to run some outdoor PoE cables. First, let's talk about my choice of PoE switches, then about outdoor cables. In the third section, let me explain the initial setup and the issues I encountered. Then let's discuss what the root cause was. In the end, this is the new setup and it's working fine. Let's talk about that in the video. In one of my previous videos, I already talked about this USW-Flex in details. This is my favorite Ubiquiti switch because of its dimensions and because of its flexibilities. In this particular outdoor setup, I plan to use 4 of them. Here what you see is, let's assume this one is the bigger PoE switch inside my house in my server room. And this is the switch I'm going to mount outdoor. And this is a PoE camera I want to use in my backyard. I need 2 cables. This one is going to connect the indoor PoE switch with the outdoor PoE switch, and this one connect the PoE camera. So for this blue one, I have a special requirement. As I mentioned in the beginning, I wouldn't be able to run the PoE cable through my attic. So this one has to be outdoor and it has to be buried. And for this gray one, just any outdoor cable should work. For the cable that needs to be buried, I went with this true cable sold on Amazon. So as you can see, it's category 6. It supports direct burial and it's waterproof. Of course, I need it. And it's outdoor rated. It's solid bare copper. Of course, I want to avoid those cheap aluminum ones. And it supports PoE++. When it comes to safety standard, it's ETL listed. If you went with shielded, it will be a little bit more expensive, but I chose the unshielded ones just because it's for my home network. I'm okay with unshielded. So this is the direct burial cable I chose. In the right side, for the ones which need to stay outside, I went with the much cheaper UniFi outdoor cable. As you can see, for the same length, this one is only 2/3 of the price of the direct burial one, right? And let's see what's the difference. We can scroll down to the specification. The cable type is category 5e. For this case, it doesn't matter 6 or 5, they both work. And it's shielded, good. And when it comes to the wire gauge, as you can see, the left one is thicker, 23 AWG, and the UniFi one is 24 AWG. That explains why the left one is more expensive. The good thing is it's also solid bare copper. I'm perfectly fine with this cheaper UniFi outdoor one because I don't need to bury this type of cable. Let's compare the inside of the 2 cables side by side. In the left side, that's the true cable which can be buried because I chose the unshielded one. Outside is just a layer of plastic and soft paper. You can see the hard plastic spline inside. In the right side, you can see the UniFi shielded cable. The outer layer is metal and then a plastic layer. Inside, you can see a copper drain wire. This is the network diagram for my initial setup. So in the upper part of the screen, you can see in my server room inside the house, I have the PoE switch which support PoE++. Of course, I run the true cable because I need to bury them around the house. And the lower part of the screen is for my backyard where I needed all the PoE devices to work. In the west side, I run one cable. In the east side, I run another cable. So the idea was, okay, because of all the troubles to bury cables, I only want to run one cable in each side. But because I have multiple PoE devices in each side, just one USW-Flex switch is not enough, right? So I need two of them. I had only one PoE++ input, so I need to daisy chain the two USW-Flex switches. As you can see, in west side, I have two flex switches. In the east side, I had another two. They were both daisy chained. When it comes to PoE power, there are two different things. One thing is the power input was the maximum watt it supports. And then the other thing is, once the device gets the power, what's the power budget it can provide to power other PoE devices? Here you can see from this source PoE switch, the USW Pro, because I use the PoE++ part, its maximum PoE output is 64 watt. Super good, I have no complaint. But for this particular USW Flex, after it received this PoE++ power, what's the power it can provide? That's a different number. So in the right side, as you can see, if it's powered by PoE++, it can only provide 46 watt output, which means for all the power consumed by the second switch and all the PoE devices, the sum shouldn't exceed 46 watt. When I did the initial setup, I didn't calculate the total power requirement carefully. I took it for granted it's enough. That's why I went with this daisy chain approach. As you can see, I have different colors for the cables. The blue ones, I use the true cable because I need to bury them. But for the green ones, I don't need to bury them. So I went with the cheaper UniFi cable. I have three colors for PoE parts. For all the PoE cameras devices, they just need normal PoE power. But for the second USW Flex, for the daisy chain one, it needs the PoE plus power. And for the first USW Flex, it gets power from the PoE switch in the server room. It needs PoE++. So I have three different PoE part types. The result for the initial setup was it worked flawlessly in the beginning. But after about half a year, all of a sudden, the second daisy chain PoE switch from time to time would have the LED light flashing, indicating it didn't have enough power to support all the PoE devices. And then the only way to resolve it was I had to reset this power input by reset this part in the source PoE switch. Sometimes it would resolve the problem, but later it simply occurred again randomly. I suspected it was caused by the power budget, so then I did this calculation. As you can see, this was my initial daisy chain setup. This is the first USW Flex. This is the second USW Flex. So the first switch gets power from the PoE switch in the server room through the PoE++ part. And in the right side, you can see the detailed calculation. Let's start with the daisy chain PoE switch. It needs to power 3 cameras and a floodlight. So I listed their maximum power consumption here. Don't forget the power needed by the PoE switch itself, which is 5 watt. So if you add all of them together, you will end up with this number. But in the upper side, as you can see, the maximum power can be provided by the first PoE switch from this part is only 25 watt, which means in some situations, in worst case scenario, the 25 watt is not enough to support all the power requirement from the second UniFi switch. So that was the root cause for my problem. But why it didn't happen in the beginning? I guess it was because maybe in the middle I changed the PoE devices. I didn't remember the details. Maybe I add some device or I switch some device. Or it's simply because of the weather change, because of the outside temperature change. So the power consumption fluctuates. But anyway, I believe the root cause was due to the power requirement from the second UniFi switch. To resolve it, I had to cut this DC chain, I had to go to the regular setup, which is for both USW-Flex, I had to get the power from the PoE switch from the server room. I ended up with this new setup. It's almost the same as the initial one. The only difference is you can see for each side, the east and the west, I added one additional buried PoE cable to provide the PoE++ power to the second PoE switch. So in this way, I don't have the power budget issue, and since I switched to this new setup, everything runs smoothly. I didn't have any problem. Okay, so basically the solution for me for this case was very simple. As long as I didn't go with the shortcut approach by DC chaining them, the setup works fine. Of course, I need to spend a lot of effort to bury 2 cables in each side instead of just one. Okay, that's the end of this video. Hope it's helpful. Thanks for watching.